Anyway.
It doesn't happen.
Right.
It literally doesn't happen. And then,
Get out of the background.
No, you're okay.
There's a nice comfortable step to sit on there. This couch is actually pretty comfy, which is good.
yeah, the first one sucked.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why this one happened.
Oh, what, you gave him a
Well,
hard time for his
also a
uncomfortable
little
couch?
bit, but also his cat was tearing it up a little bit.
Oh, okay. He doesn't have a cat anymore, does he?
No, got rid of the cat.
Got rid
Okay.
of the couch, got rid of the cat.
The cat ended up being, like, people from all over the country were dying for the cat.
Really? What kind of cat?
It's one of these, like, Bengal. It was a Bengal or something.
Okay.
And you have to hold it like this. They're really long cats. It could jump to this. I mean, it was a crazy looking. It looked like a tiger.
Okay.
Like
I was
a
over
tiger.
at his house. I didn't see it.
So as uncomfortable as it may be, once you guys are a little closer together, and you can take the pillows that are behind
There we
you
go.
or to the right and left of you, and you can put them behind your backs a little bit so you guys are sitting up a little more straight.
Okay.
Okay.
The couch looks like it's making you guys
It's a little
sit.
smushy.
Yeah.
It's smushy
So,
and it's too
so
deep for
we're
us.
looking too laid back.
A little bit, yeah.
No, that's good.
That too close, Matt? River?
I think it's okay.
No reverb? Okay, good.
Actually, this-
Where is
I'm
your...
with a decent frame.
Mine's inside.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is like-
Okay.
You
Fancy.
hear 'em all right?
Yeah.
Ted,
Hearing well.
Neither one of us is quiet, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I've certainly never been called quiet or a slow driver.
or a slow driver. You
So,
are
how is the background noise? Does it matter?
now.
Oh, should we turn? Yeah, do you want to turn the HVAC off?
Fan off, I get it.
Turn it up to like 78 or 79.
And fan on
The
auto.
fan will be off, I think. Let me turn this to silent.
Right, phones to silent, please.
Yes.
How long do we need? 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock?
Depends on how long.
Okay, I'll put it to 2.
I don't think we'll be doing it that long, but who knows? You guys can
Yeah.
start talking about Marco Vogue, radiation, Rochester.
So we're not talking to each other, we're
You can
talking.
space out a little bit.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, we're lovers. How's that? Yeah, that looks a little more.
Brothers from another mother.
We've gotten to that point, that's for sure. 4 years of working together.
So there is no off. There's on, auto, or circulate.
Auto.
There might be an off.
I already put system off. Fan's
Yeah.
still on.
Auto then.
Auto, yeah. Thank you, Eric.
Circulate will have this level of noise right here.
Oh, it does actually have a lower speed, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's still too loud.
Yeah, we should just go off for
Yeah.
this period of time.
Never mind, I'll turn it off.
Auto.
Auto.
It is on auto.
It's probably just going through a few.
Oh yeah, it'll probably shut down in like a minute.
It's
Yeah, give me a second.
Defrosting the coil or something. Well, that should be fan off for that.
Is that thing squishing under your weight?
This?
Yes.
Maybe.
Okay.
It wasn't before when I was on that side, but I think maybe I'll get a chair.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that thing's moving, man.
Oh, that's reassuring. Good thing he's got the TV on the wall.
Zit medication. Or a painkiller, one or the other.
What is that?
They are that, but then they cause other kinds of pain.
The Nate and Ted. Wait, is it the Ted and Nate show or the Nate and Ted show?
I think we do Nate and Ted, but not because of my ego, just because I end up being the front man.
Nate's the face.
Yeah, I'm the front man.
And you
Must be a shitty industry if I'm the face.
Hmm?
What does that make you?
Murdoch? I was A-team. If I'm face, you're Murdoch.
I'm Carl.
Carl from what?
Rove.
Oh, yeah, actually, that is true. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we necessarily want that recorded or not, but we do view ourselves as I'm like GW, and he's Carl Rove. He's the man behind the curtain. Not that we agree politically with it, but it's an analog. And watch, he's going to totally post that sometime. He's going to out us both.
Yeah.
It'll go blank in a second. Good. I just want you to give me, once I do this little clap to sync all the cameras.
Oh man, that's cool.
You want to clap? You want to do the clap?
So that's going to be where you sync your audio.
Right. Just one of those.
Do a good loud clap, Ted.
So, but to the camera, both hands parallel to the ground, and then
And it
Let me
can
see
be
if I got-
horizontal. It doesn't have to be.
I like parallel.
Yeah, but it can be
He's
vertical.
being.
Come on.
We all have our anal.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
Be on the diagonal.
I've never sunk anything like that. It's always failed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually use a slate.
It's the obsessive compulsive in all of us.
Did you bring your slate?
No, I didn't. The sound guy brings a slate.
There
Yeah,
we
where's
go.
the sound guy?
Yeah. He's phoning it in today.
Sound guy looks suspiciously like Matt and John.
He does.
Mm-hmm.
That's all good. They at least have
I don't know
sound.
where to begin, but it's like I'm here meeting you for the first time. It's been 5 years of knowing you.
Is it that long? Holy
Yeah.
cow! 5 years?
13, I think we started his project. He was an early one. He was a pretty early audit. And
Right,
then it
so
took a little bit to
start-
execute.
The first time I heard you, you were yelling in my kitchen. You were yelling in my kitchen the first time I heard you. All I heard for the months prior to that was just about this guy named Ted who lived in Rochester, and I also thought Rochester was fake.
Fiction of his imagination.
Yeah, and I'm like, Nate's just working with this one guy and being taken by another contractor.
His imaginary big
Another
brother.
HVAC specialist. So that's when I met you, was in the kitchen, and I was like, okay, Ted is real, and Ted is definitely hammering away at this company that we hired to put in to install the HVAC green speed carrier system, in which they ordered a 4-ton air compressor unit, delivered it, but you specified 3-ton.
And they
That's right.
bid a 3.
Right. Let's start there. Why did we go with a 3-ton unit? What in your
I can't remember yesterday, and you're asking me for something 5 years ago?
okay?
Well, I
it's a
remember.
big moment in
No,
my
no, no,
life.
no. So let's go back to when you heard me. Did you hear me when I was at volume level 2 or 3, or did you just come in at like when I had gone to? I think I went to 11.
Maybe I heard it. You probably started at 3 because Nate told you what was going on. You were just baffled. So you went from 3 to 11 fairly quickly, specifically when you heard their reasoning.
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of time to turn the volume up slowly on that. My preference is to go one notch at a time so that when their ears bleed, it's their fault. But the unit was delivered and the guys wanted to install it, and it was pretty obvious that if we didn't go up to 11, and it
I
was,
had tried already. I was at like 3 or 4, and I don't like to go above 3 or 4 because I tend to be a nice guy and I don't like to go into full jerk mode. But I have this friend who doesn't mind going into jerk mode, so I
well,
gave you a call.
it's my role.
It is.
So it's not all that much fun, but somebody's got to do it.
I think you had
so.
fun that day, though.
Well, I just sort of tired of these HVAC contractors sort of thinking that they'll just do whatever the hell they want without any accountability. And then when you're like, look, our skin, we actually have skin in the game in these things, unlike you, and so I was tired of it. And Nate was pretty new to it too, so I sort of felt like I needed to really support him. You know, and really be like, okay, this stuff is really going to be important here.
Yeah. And
And it has been. Subsequently, it's been very important.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of battles I've had to fight since then, but that was a particularly pitched battle. That was just not pretty. And it made it so we haven't used them to install another unit. That was that. Like, don't make my life that hard, or I won't give you another job.
Well, and for background, we had blower door test, energy models, understanding of where the house was, and also an understanding of where we were going to take the house. And so we really clearly understood exactly the size of the equipment. Now, we hadn't done a whole lot of duct diagnostics because for a lot of reasons. Nothing really supports duct diagnostics. You're not going to tear the house apart and totally change the ductwork anyway. And so ductwork ends up kind of taking a back seat, unfortunately. But in most cases, if you have undersized equipment to ductwork, there are adjustments that can be made. So it's not a whole lot of risk having your equipment undersized to your ductwork. Whereas if your equipment's oversized to your ductwork, you're really, this house here, we just turn the equipment off because it's so noisy it's going to affect the recording.
Yeah. Where your house, most of the time, do you really notice the heat pump being on?
No. Inside the house, no. Outside, summer, no. Spring, fall, no. But when it gets cold out, it is the beast in the winter that is letting you know things are working hard.
When they,
you know?
yeah, when they reverse and go into heat pump mode, they make a little bit more noise.
Just all the time. It's on constantly, and it's just roaring away. When it's 10 below out, and you walk outside and you hear the thing, you get used to it. At first, it's kind of like, wow, that thing's loud. People come over like, that's loud. But
It's working.
But it's working, and as a homeowner, it quickly shifts into, not that it's justification mode, but you just kind of say, you know, it's cold out, and that thing is really
Working
doing
its tail
job
off.
so I can stay warm.
Yeah.
Well, the exciting thing is, too, Nate just told me that your total energy use is like 14,000 kilowatt hours a year.
12,200.
12,200 kilowatt hours a year. That's heating, cooling, all your video editing and stuff. You work out of your home. And
Hot water?
hot
lights.
water, lights.
Server?
No, I have to say that we have traveled a little bit in the past year, or I have. But I don't
Right.
know how to gauge any of this. Like, is that a lot?
No. Like it's some, but it's probably 500 kilowatt hours, maybe 1,000. So
Less than $100 a month on average for how many square feet?
well, it's not quite less than 100, but it was 120.
120. 12 cents
12 cents a kilowatt hour?
kilowatt hour. Then,
Something like that. Yeah.
Okay. So that's cheap.
Okay. Let's break for a second. We're good.
Yeah, can we get that, the, whatever comment was just made? The one where I was futzing with the camera, I don't know what they were saying.
Well, there's many other things that
Okay.
we're going to go back into, but I think
Okay.
you were talking about me, my house. My house just being, so anything we say, don't be afraid of saying it again, okay?
Okay.
Or anything you say, don't be afraid of saying it again. Like this, so we're going to talk about those numbers again. Like, is that a lot? My usage of my house, 12,000 kilowatts?
Yeah, 12,000 kilowatt hours a year. And for reference, 12,000 kilowatt hours a year is a lot, but that would only be a lot if heating wasn't included. So that is your complete energy use. It's not, this is just your lights, just your air conditioner, and the dishwasher and various things. That's also your hot water and your heating and cooling. So when you put all that in, it's a remarkably small number, particularly for a 1918 house.
We would go to a house like that and often see 12,000 kilowatt hours a year. And they have a gas furnace and a gas water heater and a gas stove and a gas dryer. So 12,000 kilowatt hours a year with no gas meter is pretty cool because most people's heating and cooling is over half of their energy use.
Yeah. for reference, the calculator that Eric built, actually.
Eric, there you go.
There you go.
Show the
Depending
calculator.
on your square footage of your home, what is the square footage of your home?
1,600 I put in.
It's 17.
There you go. Oh, yeah, 17. I'm sorry, 17, yeah.
1,700. All right, so an EUI of 24. So less than 24 is the category of really good, because the calculator said, we looked at just the electric use, and because you have no oil or gas or whatever in addition for heating, that puts you in a very low category.
Okay.
And this is out of a data set from the Department of Energy for Ohio that compares you to
How many houses
1,000
in
or
the
so other homes.
Yeah, there are thousands of homes in Ohio. I don't have the number in front of me right now. How many are in Ohio? I think there were 200 or 300 homes in Ohio.
2,000 or 3,000, yeah.
That's great data.
And can we see the thing again? Did you guys get a look at that?
Let me
Yeah.
refresh that.
Yeah, I'm fine. I'm just making sure I'm not.
Yeah, you can just stay there. I have to go into the sale house. I'll move over.
Yeah, because I think that this chart is something that we're trying to develop out so it'll be more fun for people to play with.
Right, so this is just showing, based on your inputs, what you put in is, or what we put in for you is 1,700 square feet, 12,000 kilowatt hours a year. That puts your house in the scale of our good to bad house, pretty down near the bottom, 24. So it's meant to be, looking at less than 24 as a category of, there's not much more opportunity to improve this kind of house. And there's a whole bunch of other categories. If you're up towards the bad house, then there's a lot of opportunity to make improvements to the home.
And that's actually a pretty good proxy of my house sucks to live in, or my house is pretty easy to control and comfortable. And what we're going to try and do is help people correlate their energy use to other problems and complaints that they have in the home. There's a home with really low energy use is likely to be very comfortable and a healthy home to live in.
This data is going to be important for you. Why? Hang on a second. We'll come back to that. I actually want to go back to something that we talked about in the beginning. Maddie, tell me when you're ready.
All right.
Okay. So we were talking about the initial install when I was meeting you, Ted. Strange that this happened today, actually at 10 a.m., but I didn't get it until I got out of the tunnels. Hi, John. It's Roseanne Singer calling. And I'm checking in to see how the remodeling is going and what status is on the possible ductless split system. Please advise. Hope your summer's going well. So she's actually reaching out because of the mini split system. But she reached out while I'm in front of the two of you here today. Just kind of an odd thing. I didn't read this whole
That's awesome.
text, but she's just reaching out because she wants the mini split system. But
That's fantastic,
why is that fantastic?
because it means that you haven't totally fallen off her radar.
I had them come over and look at the attic space, which was spray foamed.
Okay,
And in looking at it, I wanted to try and get a mini split system up there, so I needed an estimate.
okay.
Plus, there was the issue of how much it's going to cost, which I needed to factor into the finances of the woman that used to live in my house. You know.
Yep.
So, all right. So, Roseanne Sininger, that was who was there. Why is going to well, you may have talked about this, but why is going to a smaller unit more efficient for a home?
Well, we think that there are savings in a lot of places, but most important to the consumer is comfort. And so a smaller unit is more comfortable because it manages relative humidity better in our climate. It's quieter, requires less airflow. It runs longer to satisfy, and so it's not a hot, cold kind of thing. It's sort of just a continuous, gentle cool. And we think that we suspect that by getting the equipment to run longer, we are saving more energy from cycling losses than our models would otherwise show, because we're seeing savings that are sort of hard to explain. When we model the savings, we're getting additional savings on top of the model. So the savings are actually oftentimes more than we expect with these modulating pieces of equipment that don't shut off. And we think it's because people never touch the thermostat. And if we can design it so that people never touch the thermostat, or when I mean never, like I have friends that before we went and fixed their homes were adjusting their thermostats on the order of 2 and 3 times a day. And then after we fix the home, they're like, well, if I touch the thermostat once a week, that's a lot. If you touch the thermostat once a week, we think of that as never. I don't know, did that answer your?
Partial.
I think you use cycling losses, and I don't think many people are going to know what that means. So I might as well take a swing. So cycling losses is when you turn things on and off. When the furnace turns on, it has to start blowing warm air through the ducts, but the ducts are cold. So as it runs for a long time, it warms the ducts up, but as soon as it shuts off, the ducts start to cool down again. And so you get a cycling loss from where you're warming it and then it cools off, and you warm it and it cools off. Where if you just let it run all the time, it's the equivalent of highway miles in a car versus city. So it's a
And
very
running your
different way.
car cold. So if you let your car cool off and then you start it up to drive it a mile and then you let your car cool off again, a lot of that energy is going to warming the car up rather than moving the car. So energy that goes to warming the ductwork up isn't warming the room.
Yeah.
And really, you don't care if your ductwork's warm, you really care if the room's warm. You got to have warm ductwork in order to warm the room, or you have to have cool ductwork in order to cool the room, because those BTU, when you start thinking like a BTU, where's the BTU going to go? It's going to go to cold. And so if it senses cold on its way to you, it's going to go to that instead of to you. And one of the things that we do when we think about designing our projects is we really think about human beings not as things that need to be warmed up or cooled down. We think about a human being as so when we're thinking about you, we're thinking not about heating you up or cooling you down. What we want to do is manage your rate of cooling. Does that make sense? If we cool you too fast, you're going to be cold. And if we cool you too slowly, you're going to be warm. And so we want to cool you at just the ideal rate. And the way that you are cooled is the temperature of the air is less than the temperature of your body, and so that'll have a cooling effect. But a huge way that you are cooled is evaporative. So you're losing latent heat as moisture evaporates from your skin. So if we manage the relative humidity, that will manage the speed of evaporation. It will also do other things like make your house healthy and slow the volatile organics that become airborne. I guess those are sort of evaporative too, aren't they? I don't know exactly how those work.
Yeah, they must be.
But what we found by tracking indoor air quality is if we keep relative humidity below 50%, we end up having situations where the volatile organic compounds end up being lower than when we see relative humidity get to 55, 60, 65%. The volatile organics start to trend up. The other thing that ends up happening is by keeping relative humidity lower, we're able to turn the thermostat up. And we think that there's savings in that. We think that lower relative humidity, while you have to dehumidify to achieve it, the value is overcome by the higher temperature settings. And there's benefits to that too. You have warmer surface temperatures, And that's going to make for a more durable house, because it's not a problem that houses get wet. It's a problem when they don't get dry, and moisture goes to cold. So if we have a warmer house, we're going to have a house that has higher drying potential, both seasonally and on a daily basis. And so we like the idea of having higher set point temperatures on the thermostat. So having lower relative humidity is a goal just for that, but you have energy savings, you have more comfortable people. By having lower relative humidity, you have less male-female fighting, I think, because men, if they have enough evaporative cooling, can put up with higher set points, whereas if the dew point is higher, if you have higher relative humidity, men want it colder, and that ends up being clammy, and women end up not being comfortable first. So we're trying to look at this holistically and think about how all of these things intersect. And it seems to be working really well. We get a lot of feedback from homeowners. What temperature do you keep your house at, John?
Right now, 78.
So
78, I think,
when you're there,
when I'm there during these summer months, 78.
78 degrees. So your relative humidity must be pretty well managed. It must be around 45 in order for you to be comfortable at 78.
I wish I could answer that for you. I'm still learning that this is such a big deal. I know it dehumidifies the house because I experienced it last year of just walking out into sweltering heat and going back into my ice bucket, which was at 80 degrees. So that's when I started realizing that like the dehumidifying the house.
Right, because what happens is the moisture on your skin evaporates so fast that your skin temperature goes quickly to dew point temperature, which is, so if it's 55 degrees, your skin will go to 55 degrees pretty quickly in a low dew point scenario. And if you're wet, it feels cold.
So in everything you're describing, just in this example, in your question and asking me, like, what do you keep your house set up, and me stating this example, well, we had it at 80 last year. Like I said this to my mother, like, it's 80 degrees, Mom. It's so cold in my house. She's like, 80's not cold.
How can 80 be cold, John?
No, just like, I don't want to come
Go to
over
the
your house.
doctor.
So I started telling people, which is, and you're gonna get on me for this, but I basically was trying to tell people and market it and say, like, my 80 is your 70.
Right.
Like, that's what it is in translating it. So going further with this, I'm finding everything that I was brought up around to be like counterintuitive. You are bringing like home logic to people, or logic of the home.
Breaking
Home logic
schemas.
to people and that information, and it's very counterintuitive. Even when you were telling me years ago, you don't want to ramp up, ramp down. Like, you're going to spend more money doing that, John. I'm like, but that doesn't make sense, because when I press the button and it turns on, that's when I'm using energy, and that's when I'm costing money, and like, we'll just heat the house for a little bit, get that burst of heat, and then we'll be fine for a couple of hours. Then we'll do it again. But all of it makes sense. You don't think that it has to transfer throughout the entire house. I mean, unless you're thinking along those lines, like, but even so, I think most people would push it out the window and say, I don't want to run it the entire time. So when you told me my green screen carrier was going to be running almost all the time, I said, that's not good.
Right.
But I trusted it. I trusted this process. I
Took a leap of faith.
And I'm astonished that my green speed carrier right now, during the summer months, is running 24/7, keeping my house at a steady 78 degrees, and I look at it daily, and I'm not even reaching like $1 in costs in terms of energy a day. I'm like,
It's running all the time.
50 cents, 2 kilowatts, and it's running all the time.
Right.
Just pushing air throughout the house, keeping it
Just what the house needs. Just what the house needs.
dehumidified. Now the winter's a little different, but you know what? Everyone's spending money in the winter.
Yeah.
So and
Everyone.
everyone's heating their houses during the
Yeah.
winter. So it's just, that's learning how the system works with electric backup, not gas backup, is the important thing.
You did a great job teaching that guy.
He did good. Look at that.
You did good. Look at that.
I learned so
You're
much
his
about
mentor.
radiation too in the last couple days.
You're his mentor. Nice job, Nate.
I'm meeting mentor to mentor right now.
Yeah.
I'm meeting mentor to mentor right now.
Oh,
Yeah.
this is trickle down. So
This is
I
trickle
learned
down.
so much of
I'm
what
so
I know
proud.
from him.
This is exciting for me.
The first time I think I spoke to you, you were talking about so many different things. I'm like, fuck, man, Ted's got too much damn knowledge. And then I'm like, Nate
Yeah.
explained it to me. I'm like,
In a
"Ted's
very
got too
narrow
much
band.
knowledge."
Very narrow band. I got
Yeah.
depth, narrow.
So, but you essentially are taking something that is intuitive, that is
Yes.
intuitive for people, and telling them that it's counterintuitive, and we have the information and the data to back it up. Leave faith or go with the process and learn for yourself.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens when you let the house go cold during the wintertime. We've been talking a lot about summer, but you let the house go cold in the wintertime, and then you heat it up. The moisture carrying capacity of the air increases as you heat the air up. So suddenly air that had decent relative humidity is dry because the moisture content per unit of air decreases. And so now you've got chapped lips and bleeding sinuses, and all of these, have trouble sleeping. All of these things happen when you warm the house up because you're not keeping the relative humidity stable. So now what you do is you throw a humidifier on your furnace so that you can try and counteract that. But because you're jacking your temperatures all over the place, the humidifier is confused all the time. And the surface temperatures of your home are cold.
Takes a while to warm up.
And those surface temperatures mean you're uncomfortable even at 74 degrees. Because those surface temperatures are pulling heat out of you. We talked about sensible heat, which is the temperature of the air. And then we talked about latent heat, which is the temperature of the humidity of moisture. And now we're talking about radiant. And radiant can be pulled out of you as well as it can be pushed into you. Everybody loves standing on a radiant floor because it feels warm, and that's because it's slowing the heat loss of your feet, and so you get the sensation of warmth. Well, the reverse is true. If that floor is freezing cold, everything below your knees goes cold. And when that part of your body is cold, your brain is like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. So you go to the thermostat and jack it up even more because you're trying to fight the fact that your knees and your feet are cold. And whereas if you fix the house so that you're not heating the outdoors when you turn your thermostat up, that you're just heating the indoors, then it's really better to just leave it at a comfortable temperature, because then the surfaces are going to remain warm. I mean, does it make any sense to heat the house up while you're there and then have all of your surfaces get nice and warm just as you leave and then turn the thermostat down? Now you've got all this beautiful, mean radiant when you're not there. And then when you come back, everything's cold again. It's absurd. Plus, now you've got this moisture issue where you might be finding yourself with condensation forming on your surfaces. If condensation ever forms on your windows, where else might that moisture be forming in your house?
That you can't see.
That you can't see. That should make people really concerned, because that condensation is part of the 3 components of mold.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
What do you need for mold?
You need the right temperature, you need a food source, and you need moisture. And when you get moisture is when the temperature is low enough that it condenses on a surface. Like, we're all used to having a can of beer or a glass of lemonade that gets moisture on the outside of it. That means that the liquid inside that bottle or glass is colder than what the air can handle. It's lower than the dew point of the moisture in the air. So if you are not heating a house well, you are going to end up with some surfaces at dew point. So I wrote that crazy article for the Journal of Light Construction. I called it the Petri dish house.
Oh,
It was the client was originally from, I believe it was Sri Lanka, and she wanted to have 85-degree, very high humidity weather inside of her home in Cleveland when it was cold outside. There's this thing called physics, and it doesn't care what you want. So they were cleaning the house daily and weekly with bleach to wipe the mold down, because they were running 6 humidifiers in addition to the humidifier on the furnace set full bore. I joke like it only went to 7. I'm like, you need one of these that goes to 11, man. And a couple of them really. It was obscene how much moisture. All their kids have asthma. It's like, yeah, that's
no
it.
surprise there.
No surprises.
Nothing about indoor air quality. They got a lot of occupancy in a very small house and tight, and they're trying to keep it moist in a place where, you know, the dew point in the wintertime outdoors might be 5 degrees, and they're trying to keep dew points at 70 degrees inside, and
It was
so
crazy. Well, I could tell which parts of the house weren't insulated because there's mold growing on it. There was a bay window they had, and he's like, oh, I painted that last week. There is mold growing on it a week after painting it with Kills.
people aren't connecting the fact that mold and mildew is a home performance problem. They're thinking, well, I'll call the mold guy, which is, we know a mold guy who's got a lot of building science chops, but most of these people are just going to go out there and treat the symptom instead of fixing the house. And if you fix the house, the next step is fix the occupant so that they understand how to operate the house to avoid these problems. And sometimes you'll have an occupant that has requirements that they don't have the resources in their budget to satisfy. That house is probably going to fall down in the next 10 years. I mean, it's going to be a basket case.
Yeah.
And we've actually dealt with a house that had some significant problems, interstitial, like between the inside wall and the outside wall. I mean, there are so many places you can't see in a house that you're having a problem, that if you're operating the house badly, there's a high likelihood you're creating yourself problems down the road.
Well, you're creating mold in your house that you don't know about because you're running the house too cold with too high of relative humidity.
Yeah.
And you're just asking for trouble. Where your house, the odds of mold forming in your house because you keep it so warm in the summertime and your
Very low.
humidity is so low, the odds of you having any substantial mold growth in your house are almost zero.
I don't expect any.
Yeah, there shouldn't be.
I don't expect any now.
Where this house,
So you talk about fixing things. Fixing and... Nice to meet you.
Eric,
thank you.
thanks, buddy.
Great seeing you again. Till next time.
All right, see you guys.
Oh, we'll talk to you tomorrow at 10:30 or, oh,
Yeah,
10,
10.
okay.
Fixing is a very big word for the two of you. Isn't it?
We like to fix things.
When you meet with a homeowner, you're gauging them about what level of fix they are at, in a way.
And what they want. And then whether their budget is likely to get them there.
Yeah, the first step is really get a clear understanding of the problems by doing thorough questioning. The other thing that we do is we try to stretch the process out into more steps instead of condensing it into fewer. Because once you ask somebody some questions, when you go to your doctor for your physical, the doctor asks you a bunch of questions that you're maybe not ready for and writes down your answers. And then you leave and you're like, oh my God, I wanted to tell him about this and I wanted to tell him about that and or her about these. My doctor's a her, but so by stretching this out, we design it to have more of a human timetable so that we can tease all of those problems out of the homeowner that most of the time they have this random awareness of and then they try to ignore.
Yeah. We don't want to think about our houses sucking.
I don't
But they
want to
all
think
do.
about my problems.
Yeah.
I want to think about going bicycling,
Yeah.
you know?
So you have to gradually give people time and space to tell you about what problems they have in their house and what they would like to fix.
Aren't you
Our-
worried?
Our business is structured in such a way that the primary objective is to really help people understand what their problems are. And since we don't sell the equipment and we don't perform the work, we're consultative and sort of support to the homeowner in their decisions. It changes the nature of the relationship to one of just focusing very narrowly on what our objective is for each step. And the first step is to have really clear understanding of what the homeowner's upset about.
Why are we here?
Why are we here? And then educate them. Like you said before, turn a lot of their paradigms upside down. And that's a lot to do. That's a lot to do even in one visit, just those things. And then the next thing we want them to do is to start putting a budget to the value of the problem. Because usually, well, ideally our target market is $75,000 to $150,000 of annual income. And so we're not talking to people who have unlimited budgets, you know, and so what we're trying to do is really understand either what it's worth to them to make a problem go away or what they can afford to spend to make a problem go away. And it needs to be the lesser of the two that we design to, because what they want may not be what they can afford. Did
Well,
I
that's-
explain that very well?
Pretty well. Well, some people definitely have champagne taste on beer budget. So, are you willing to do some work yourself? Did you do some work yourself on your own house?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so where we can design for DIY to help people save money is really great. It
Yeah.
really has helped people save a whole bunch of money on their projects.
Well, one client, he executed the top level project, which was supposed to be $25,000. He executed it for 15 because he did so much of the work himself. And his work quality was so good, I don't think we could have paid anybody to do better than he did
Right.
because he cared.
Yeah, how cool is that? He saved himself 10 grand and saved himself 35%
Yeah.
of the cost of what the project would have been if he'd had to contract the whole thing. That's pretty significant.
I was my own contractor in my own way, but it's.
Well, all of our clients are.
I say we are, but at the same time, the amount of work I did, I don't even know how to gauge it, but I know it was
Did a lot.
5 figures worth,
Yeah, yeah.
and not just like breaking that barrier of 9,099. It was way more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, you easily
But then
did
also
20 grand.
Managing all of it is extremely time consuming. And if you've got a 9 to 5 job and you're coming home and dealing with whatever's happening during that time you were gone, and then
Right.
continuing to see what they do every single day when you come home, and making sure that they're on point. Well, I had multiple projects going on at once, but it just was like it's a lot of time put into your home.
And what we like to do is not be in front of the homeowner. We like to be behind them because we have a higher level of subject matter expertise on the quality control, and therefore, I mean, it changes the dynamic of the relationship with the contractor when the homeowner is there, sort of like Nate was kind of the homeowner in your situation between the two of us, and then when the homeowner isn't getting progress in the right direction, with the contractor on the quality control thing, like the sizing or looking, we want better air sealing with the spray foam or whatever it is. We can come in behind the homeowner in a way that the homeowner can't come in if we're in front of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I? Can you put that a different way?
Well, what we do is very consultative. Like, did I ever really sell you anything? Or did I give you options and you chose?
I have to ponder those. You did give me options,
Mm-hmm.
various options, in terms of tier of how much we could spend. Each tier was different. Go this route, go this route, go this route.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, it just started making sense.
And you
what
followed.
you were telling me, so it's just like, okay, we're gonna do this.
Right.
Well, and so that's a great point. What we do is predicated on trust, and it's hard to build that, and you certainly can't build it in one or two interactions with people. Well, even just right now, I'm going through an email thing where I know that the trust is not quite there yet, because it just takes time while we're having the budget discussion, which is horribly uncomfortable every time. I hate that part.
We have a client who does not want to really think about this in a budget perspective, but unfortunately, you have to give us a budget because there's 1.3 million different permutations of the project that we can come up with, and we need to start narrowing in on the recommendation. And what we really, a big part of what we do is design to a budget, like an architect would design to a budget. So if you don't give us a budget, we can still design a house for you, but the chances are you're going to want a whole new redesign after you see the house we designed for you. You're going to say, oh my gosh, that is a gorgeous house, but it's about 3 times more money than we can afford. And then we'll say, well, what can you afford? And then you'll give us the budget, and we'll say, that's great. Give us a whole bunch more money to design that house now. Because we designed this house for the money you paid us, and now you're asking us to do another design. And this is hard to convey to homeowners is, first of all, these aren't handcuffs that we're asking you for. You're not going to be handcuffed to this budget. But if you don't get us in the right neighborhood, the design's not going to be optimized to your situation. And you're not going to be able to implement, or if you do implement it, if we design something that's less than you can afford, you're gonna leave opportunity on the table as far as the problems that you want solved. Because if you have 7 things you want solved, but you give us a budget that only solves 4 of them, and then later you're like, oh, well, I could have afforded more and I would have rathered afford more, and then I'd get all 7 of those things solved. You know,
But then
how are we
oftentimes-
supposed to?
Well, then oftentimes we have to undo something, which costs more money to go back and redo it in a different way so that we can nail those other objectives.
Yeah.
And we hate watching people waste money because we see people just burning $5,000 to $10,000 all the time. Almost every client has just lit fire to $5,000 to $10,000, and that hurts us to see. Where if you slow down and you push the budget to where you're going to spend that $5,000 or $10,000, but you're going to spend that plus a little bit more in a very careful way, you're going to get your results. Is your house awesome?
Yes. It's amazing.
I am so jealous of your house, frankly.
It's amazing.
My house sucks, and I need to spend $100,000 on my house to get like half what you have.
He doesn't have forced air,
Right, I understand.
so
And my walls are screwed up. Somebody
bit.
insulated my walls wrong. So I have to fix that.
There's a
And
lot
You'd have to take all the siding off or gut inside to really do that job because
So with
it's,
your clients that you currently have, are you finding that people are just kind of ready for a gut renovation?
no,
Nowhere near.
We've done one,
I mean, because you're dealing with
just one, right?
so many variables.
Who?
Um,
You were a gut renovation, pretty much, but
Slightly, yeah.
that was the closest.
no,
Well, Brad
Carl?
Mueller.
Carl?
It's okay.
Anyway,
My main
Net
point
Zero
is,
House.
who are your clients? I mean, besides me and other people, but like, how are you gauging your clients? And
how are we finding them? You
Selling
mean, or
to
who
them.
are they?
yeah,
Well, I would. We actually
We were
talked about
talking
this-
about that today
Yeah.
because our the way that we're trying to manage our lead process is via the internet.
So, one of the curses is we don't have a super specific demographic that we're going after. The demographic of people we're going after is anybody with a house that sucks badly enough to pay us to fix it. So, pretty routinely, it's an engineer or an accountant or somebody who's very numbers based. But you're an exception. You're not Mr. Numbers guy. That's not your thing. You're a creative. So I can't tell you who it is. Or Paul Schultz, the other all-electric fellow. He's a 68-year-old retired blue-collar guy who worked for the electric company. The clients are all over the map. It's just somebody who has enough problems with their house to find us, reach out, and pay us to work all the way through the problem.
My house is frustrating the heck out of me. I'm okay paying $200 to $300 to have this guy come out, do some diagnostics, measure the air leakage with a blower door, and then talk to me about building science a little bit. That's how it starts. Somebody that wants a professional to come out and give them an opinion that doesn't lead where the very next step isn't selling them $6,000 to $15,000 worth of equipment or $6,000 to $12,000 worth of insulation. You know, because usually what happens is it goes straight from come out to my house and tell me what I need, immediately tell me what I need to spend a whole lot of money on to fix it. Ours is stretch it out. Okay, I'm going to come out to your house, get a little bit of an understanding of what's going on, get an understanding of the things that really matter to you, and then the next step is going to be to do design, diagnostics, heavier diagnostics and design, so that we can understand where your house is, where we can reasonably take it based on your objectives and what we saw there. And then using the power of the wonderful computers we have today to make sure that we put the absolute smallest piece of equipment in your house that we can. Because as you know, the smaller it is, the more likely it is to run all the time. And the more it runs all the time, the more you're going to be comfortable, the more you're likely to be comfortable. And all of these other problems are going to be solved. Like, you're breathing all the time, so if the equipment shuts, then you're not getting continuous filtration. A lot of the houses were recommending fresh air, so you're breathing all the time. If the equipment shuts, you're not getting continuous filtration or continuous fresh air. So all of these, I mean, there's just so many different things that you can't. This is the other thing. If you don't run it through the process, the human brain can't handle it all. And so this is why we have a rigorous process, because otherwise you get confused.
You get
We
confused,
get confused.
Yeah, and you fall out and you end up doing nothing and you just wasted the money that you paid us. And then you're likely to go try something which doesn't work, get frustrated, and then either live with the problem, live with mediocrity, or decide that you're going to spend the money again to undo what you did, and then we'll redo it right. So it's all we're trying to do is, even though our process takes quite a while, we're ultimately trying to get it done way faster than anybody else will. But
Right.
It's one of those weird cases of where the long cut is the shortcut.
Slow down, put together a good plan, and then you don't have to take that $5,000 furnace and put it at the curb. I mean, we've taken 3-year-old, very nice furnaces out of houses and put them at the curb.
You guys did with mine.
Yep. At least you didn't pay for yours. The other clients had just paid $5,000 or $5,500 to put this furnace in. Their second floor wasn't heating well. They trusted us to put in a smaller furnace. The second floor heats now. And it's the same level furnace.
They're both beautiful furnaces, it's just one's half the size. And because it's half the size, it runs twice as long. And because it runs twice as long, the ductwork going to upstairs gets warm. And because the ductwork going to upstairs gets warm air gets delivered to the rooms. And because warm air gets delivered to the rooms, the upstairs is warm.
Why do HVAC specialists go big?
Because they're terrified that 1 hour a year that goes below zero, you won't have 4 times the power that you need to heat your house. There are a whole lot of different issues there. Consumers put too much responsibility on the HVAC contractor to solve all of their problems. Like, you're driving your car down the highway when it's 10 degrees outside with all the windows down, and it's the HVAC's fault that you're not comfortable. That's not the HVAC guy's fault. You know, you don't have any idea what your leakage is in the house. How the heck is the HVAC guy going to know whether you have leakage in the house? Are you willing to get your air leakage measured? Well, then if you're not willing to get it measured, then he's going to guess what your leakage is.
Yeah.
Because if you're not paying to have your air leakage measured, you're going to get it measured for free.
So one of the ways I look at it, it's like going to the dealership and telling the salesman, I want to tow a trailer. And I just want to make sure that it's big enough to tow the trailer. How big of a trailer are you going to tow? Well, are you going to tow like a big boat or something? I don't know. But if it doesn't tow the thing, I'm coming back here. You have to take it back, and I'm going to leave you the crappiest review you've ever seen, and I'm going to smear your name all over the place. So it better tow the trailer. So they go home in a dually with a diesel, and then you find out later that it's a 2,000-pound trailer that they could tow with a subcompact.
This is another problem, is when am I busiest? When do I not want phone call complaints that don't lead to money? When it's the coldest day of the year is when I'm really busy selling furnaces that break. I absolutely don't want somebody calling me that I already installed a furnace in saying, it's cold in my house, my furnace won't keep up. Because that's a no-pay call. And that might be a real problematic no-pay call that takes money out of my pocket when I want to be going to these calls that put money in my pocket. So from a risk analysis perspective, the HVAC guy looks at that and says, crap, I don't want that. So let's lean to this side of things, because I really don't care if they're uncomfortable when it's 40 degrees, even though that's 90% of the winter. I care if the thermostat doesn't keep up when it's 0 degrees, which is not even 1% of the winter. So from that perspective, there are a lot of perversities in these systems, and there's accountability is really broken. Homeowner doesn't have accountability for a lot of things that they really should have accountability for.
And contractors don't have accountability.
And contractors don't have any accountability for results, because the homeowner can very easily be told that's just the way it's going to be. A lot of homeowners live with very uncomfortable houses, and tracks back to very oversized equipment. And that's because the contractor put very oversized equipment in based on their fear and their desire for profit and their desire to not get a phone call on a very hot day or a very cold day. And so most of our life isn't spent in those places, but those are the places that they're trying to avoid. And they're not doing the load work to understand what the load is going to be on the house. And since they're not doing the load work, why aren't they doing the load work? Well, they're not doing the load work because the consumer doesn't understand how important it is and therefore isn't willing to pay to have it done. They think it should just be included in a free quote. And one of the designs of once you do a thing for free, if you go to a house for free, you have this built-in conflict of interest where I may never come back to this house again, but I am going to be going back to my house where my kids are and I need to feed them. And so now you're put in a position of, I could do what's really right for these homeowners, but it might be very hard to convince them to buy that. Or I could sell them what I think is easy to convince them to buy, and that might not be in their best interest, but it will get my family fed. What's your choice going to be? So if you go to a house for free, you're going to be focusing on solving your problems, not the homeowner's problem. That's just the way it is. I don't care who tells you otherwise. This is a fact of nature. Whereas if you pay somebody to come to your house to provide you with a service that you've been very specific about, when they go to your house, now you can hold them accountable for delivering on that service. And what we do is we go to houses and get paid for measuring leakage, helping people understand building science, helping people understand the deficiencies of their homes. We get paid to do energy modeling. We get paid to do cost-benefit analysis on various improvements, help and then put together packages of improvements that will show people how to drive their load down so that they can put even smaller equipment in. And all of that stuff we get paid to do. So we are being paid to do the thing that is in the consumer's interest, as opposed to being at the house for free, trying to figure out how to convince that homeowner who's getting 3 quotes to buy from us. When I was doing that stuff, I was like, first I was trying to be so diligent about my energy modeling and doing all of this diagnostics and all of this stuff. And the people were like, well, I just bought from this guy. He said I needed a bigger furnace. And it just made more sense to go bigger. Bigger's better, so bigger. I went bigger. I went with this guy because he was a couple $100 less. And it only took him 15 minutes to come up with what I needed. I don't know why you took all that time. So pretty quickly I recognized that that was a really perverse situation where doing good work was actually uncompetitive. We're in a situation where if you're paid to do good work, people appreciate it. But if you're not paid to do good work, people don't appreciate it. And you will starve very quickly by doing good work.
Yeah, it's a market perversity. I mean, the free quote in general is a real problem for just what you said. So I go to your house for free, and then the whole time I'm thinking about what can I sell these people so that I can get paid for the time that I'm here. And I fought this for a good while. So the initial consults at first were free for a short while, and then I charged $50, and I was frustrated about $50 because between fuel and paying the babysitter, it was costing me $50. So I was giving up basically a day of my life to make nothing and to get nothing. And so I spent too much of my time pushing and trying to sell something, and my closing ratio was worse because people sensed that I was not being genuine. And I try very hard in my life to set it up in a way where I can be genuine all the time. Am I perfect? No. But we do our very, very best to design moral hazard out of the process. So at no point do I want what I want to be going in a different direction from what my client wants, because that's a problem. That's a moral hazard. Like, I don't want to take money from contractors because I'm going to be more likely to look at a job that isn't good enough and say, yeah, it's good enough. Or I don't want you to pay the contractor who in turn pays me, which is even worse, because then I'm much more likely to say, yes, that job's good enough, good enough, good enough. Where's my check? I don't want to do that, because then my focus is coming off of solving the problem.
And then you're in a partnership relationship with a contractor who you're really supposed to be policing.
Yeah.
It ends up being, in government, they call it regulatory capture. So Google regulatory capture, and there'll be all kinds of instances where bank regulators are owned by the banks, because those regulators want to eventually go and have a job at the bank. And so there's this quid pro quo relationship, or this inability to, or they're just friends because they work together so often. So it ends up being a situation where it's hard to be hard on them. We've also figured out a way to have our relationships with the contractors work very well, because we have a really good understanding of we think we have a really good understanding of what things should cost. And so when we do our cost-benefit analysis and our modeling, we put a price in. Our process for deciding what contractor to use is not a 3 bids one. We get 1 bid. So the only time we don't go with that bid is if their price comes back above ours. If their price comes back below ours, they get the project. So they have a very high closing ratio on projects that they do through us. And we don't work them on price. Whatever the price is, so long as it's below what we think the price should be, they get that. And what that's allowed us to do is have a relationship where, hey, you know, we didn't realize that problem over there until the wall got opened up, and it's going to take a little bit more material. Is that a problem? And the guy will be like, are you kidding? That is no problem. We'll do that extra 20 minutes worth of work, or there's no change order, there's no increase to the bid, all of those things, because they are so happy that their sales cost is dramatically reduced, and we're not squeezing them on their margins all the time, that we are able to get more out of them where it really matters to us. It matters to us to get more out of them during the time that they're there, because what we found is there are a couple of things that really lead to failure in projects, and one of those is bad design, but the other one is bad implementation. So by not squeezing these contractors, they're able to go that extra mile for us when we see a thing that was unanticipated. And that level of lubricity causes these jobs to happen faster, and no stumbling blocks, and no callbacks, and you know, no headaches for the homeowner having to have us there an extra day, no headache for the contractor having to roll his rig an extra day, no headache for us having to go back an extra day. All of these things are just so much more efficient.
Nice.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
Well, you got to watch my relationship with Gary and Donnie as we sprayed your attic. We banter, we have fun, and there were definitely a couple of spots in your house where we burned more material than was anticipated. In particular, when you got down, when your roof line, when you got down to where it met the top of the wall of the second floor, they used a lot of material. That was more than they bid for. Did you hear about it?
It just,
I rest my case.
it's just such an easier, and the other thing that we found is the homeowner's got to pay for us to deal with these bids and make sure that these guys live up to the specifications we've said, and a lot of them don't want to, they don't want to live up to this. If the work's going to be invisible to the homeowner, a lot of times that ends up being the place that they'll cut. But when it comes to outcomes, that stuff ends up not being invisible. Like the situation that Nate was just saying, you might have had snow melt there if they didn't go with the extra material, and then you still have icicles, which was an objective that you wanted to cure. I mean, there's so much that's interconnected. There's so much that's interconnected. We could talk for days about this.
I bet. Let's cut.
Ready?
Yeah. Bring both hands down a little bit, and the other hand too. Okay, and turn it up. Yeah, and then give a good clap. And one more. Cool. Okay, just to finish this one off. Why, you're rephrasing, why do HVAC specialists oversize?
Why do HVAC specialists oversize? Well, there's a lot to unpack in that question. One of the reasons is there's very little disincentive to oversize and a whole lot of incentive to oversize. There's more profit in selling bigger systems, but more importantly, there's a whole lot less risk of getting called out on the coldest or the hottest day of the year, which are the two times when HVAC contractors don't want you calling them out.
Okay, now, rephrasing again, you say HVAC specialists oversize because.
HVAC specialists oversize because.
One more time, just do it more without the flow.
HVAC contractors oversize because.
Okay. You guys are talking about variables and deficiencies that people deal with in the homes, and I know that every single house is different. But in your experiences so far of what you guys have done, what is the biggest issue for homeowners to get through?
Fear. The biggest issue for homeowners to overcome.
Sorry, just start again.
The biggest issue for homeowners to overcome is fear. There's a lot of fear in these decisions, and that's where data really comes in handy. Not only data, but case studies, examples of what other homeowners have done, examples like your home. Your home is a wonderful example that will allow homeowners to not make these catastrophic mistakes. Because you're an example of, if you overcome fear, really great outcomes are on the other side of fear.
And what's so crazy about that, just to interject, is that you're going through the process anyway. You're going through a renovation process anyway, and there's fear across the board no matter what.
Yeah.
And it was actually that was actually kind of when I accepted it, when I realized, like, you know what, we're doing this anyway. Like, we're going to be doing this amount of work and this amount of renovation. Why don't we go this route and do it with what this new building science, this new technology, whatever things Nate's talking about, whatever this phantom person named Ted is talking about, and go down that route.
He's a figment of my imagination, you should know. So he's such a good figment that I can actually project him on the couch next to me.
3D.
Yeah, he actually has a car which he drives with me in it.
Nate Adams is magic.
So,
do you want to say something?
yeah. So to the fear thing, fear is really the inverse of trust. And one of the huge problems that we see in the home performance world and in HVAC and insulation and all of these different things is no one knows who to trust because nobody actually tracks to see if something works or not. So to some degree, everything is like hacky sack. Is there a world championship for hacky sack? No, because nobody keeps score. So who's the best? I'm the best. Prove me wrong. But don't get a hacky sack out because I can't do it. But right now, I'm going to tell you from the couch, I am the best hacky sack player in the world. Prove me wrong. Now, as soon as you start bringing data into it, things really start moving forward. So we understand pretty well what works and what doesn't. We think in odds. Do we know 100%? No. Well, actually, somebody asked us for 100% certainty the other day. I said, great, $50,000. We will guarantee that everything will be like this. We will work on it until we get it right there.
It's our objective to never say no to a customer. What we want to do is give them options that they can say no to. So, oh my gosh, you want that? Well, we probably could offer it. What we really want to recommend is this over here that's, $3,000 worth of duct design and equipment specifications and leakage testing. And so this is for a new build. We have a contractor that we took through this process and he loves it, but he hasn't been able to figure out how to do it without paying for it himself. And so he has this conflict, right? And what we suggested is that instead of suffering through the conflict, that he simply offer choices to his customer and say, I'd really like you to do this with these guys and have your ductwork designed and have it match your equipment and have your equipment designed based on a load calc of where we think we can get the house without spending $1 million. So, we don't want your house to have an 80,000 BTU load. We want it to have a 30,000 BTU load. And what's it going to take to get there? And if we do that, then we could put a 3-ton heat pump in, like in your house, and it'll be beautiful all the time.
Yeah.
So, and it's understanding all of these different things. Nate's put together this really beautiful thing in one of the chapters that shows a mobile and all these different pieces that are, a bar with strings, and they all hang on this mobile, and if you get it all correct, then the mobile hangs in balance. But if you pull on one end, the whole thing goes askew. And so our design is all about sort of tying budgets back to mobiles and making houses perform in balance.
With uncertainty is a big piece of what comes into this. So basically what we gave that homeowner the option for is, well, for $3,000 you can have 90% certainty that it's going to be pretty much perfect. Or for $50,000 you can have 100% certainty. Which one do you want?
We will put FUBOTs in every room, and we will be tracking your relative humidity and your temperature. And if something goes askew, the first you'll know about it is Nate will be knocking on your door saying, "Oh, I need to make an adjustment."
Yeah, or for $3,000 we can have very high certainty that within a degree or two, your house will be every room in your house will be within a degree or two of the other rooms.
And the relative humidity will be really low, so that we'll have a very durable house. And we'll be continuously providing fresh air so that you have a healthy house. And we will continuously be filtering the air so that your particulate count is very low. And if you have asthmatic family, they're going to never want to leave because this is the only house they don't get sick in.
Yeah.
Great selling point. Wow.
So I want to go back to the fear and the trust. So I used to be an installation contractor, and my average project was about $2,500. Now we're running almost 10 times that on average. And the difference there is fear and trust. So
yeah, the consumers aren't any different, are they?
no, well,
These are all the same people with the same incomes and the same houses, and
it's almost exactly
1,800 to actually 1,200
square feet.
to 2,800 square feet. So it's meat of the middle class market, which is really awesome because this could be scaled countrywide to actually do true home performance. How exciting would that be to do true home performance nationwide and have 1 million people a year experience what you experienced? That's kind of what we'd like to see happen.
Save that objective. Did you finish everything you wanted?
No,
for
I
your
did not.
intro?
I'm sorry.
So when you are afraid of something not working, would you rather spend $2,000 or $20,000? Rhetorical question, obviously, but most consumers don't believe that something is going to work. And because you can't prove it to them with data, and you can't prove it to them with an energy model that shows, like, look, so if we do this, this should happen. And we've done enough of these that when it says this and this should happen, that's what happens. We have enough feedback loop that we know what works pretty well.
How many devices do we have tracking relative humidity, temperature, and the way your equipment is running in your home?
Put with
6,
4 Fubot and a Sense and an Ecobee.
7. Yeah, I forgot about the Sense. So yeah, we have the Ecobee, well, the stat that is on your
The
green
carrier
speed,
stat.
because that thing's amazing. And then, yeah, 4 Ecobees and then the Sense. So we have 7 different devices in your house tracking what's going on, so that if you have a problem, you can text me or email me or call me, and I'll be able to go figure out what happened.
Tell me why you did that.
Yeah. Why did I do it? Because I want to understand what worked and why.
The reason why I put 4 Fubots, an Ecobee, and a Sense in your house was because.
Yeah. That's...
Start again. The
Yeah.
reason
Nope, I got it. I just had to step back for a second.
devices.
So the reason I put so many devices in your house, so including the best thermostat that I know of residentially, an Ecobee thermostat tracking what's going on, 4 Fubot indoor air quality monitors, and then also a Sense energy monitor, is so that I can understand when something worked and why it worked, so that I can take that learning and go to the next client and have a much better idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work. And also, whenever you call me, you can tell me what you did and when, and I'll go and look at the data and see what's going on and make suggestions. Have I done that?
Yeah.
Why,
So
why are you doing this, Nate? Why do you want to do that?
Because I'm insane. No,
we like fixing things, and the only way to know if you fixed a thing is to call and talk to the consumer after you finish the work. And it's like, so I finished this thing in the spring, and we call you a week later. Are you happy? And then a couple of weeks later, tell me what you've noticed. And then maybe on the hottest day of the summer, you get a phone call. So, what do you think now? And you're like, oh, this and this. And maybe you'll be like, well, I'm having a problem with this. Okay, try adjusting this damper or whatever. And then we'll call you in the fall. How are things? And then we'll call you in the winter. And how are things? And all of that is a feedback loop that, and I use a lot of golf analogies, so I don't play golf anymore. It helps us adjust our grip and adjust our backswing so that we can try and be, we're not going to be in the perfect middle of the fairway all the time, but we want to be not in the rough. And we may not land on the center of the green, but if we can get on the green and miss the sand traps, you know, our customers tend to be coming from a place where their houses really sucked. So if we move them significantly enough that they notice, that's exciting for them and they're grateful.
Yeah, it's like horseshoes and hand grenades. Close enough is good enough.
Close enough, and if you can measure and prove that you got close enough, that's pretty cool too, because that informs the existing homeowner, and it also allows future homeowners that are having problems to understand likelihoods.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the risk thing. Oh, one of the things that we're trying to convey to people is the less you do to your house, the more certainty nothing will happen.
Yeah.
So it's sort of sigmoidal. You do a couple of things and nothing happens. And then you reach this tipping point where everything starts to come into balance on the mobile. Everything starts to come into balance, and a lot of improvement in user experience occurs. And then you get to another point where you start to get to diminishing returns. So you have this S-curve, right? And what we want to do is have people do enough so that they're not at this point in the S-curve, they're over here, where the likelihood of having significant improvement occurs.
Yeah.
Where they haven't wasted their money
And taking
and
this in a
time and effort.
totally different direction, why are we spending so much time getting this feedback so we can understand what works and what doesn't? And really what we want are incredibly happy clients, because number one, we get testimonials that are killer, and number two, we get clients that tell other people about what we do. And when you have really happy clients, you don't have to spend a lot of money on marketing. They will naturally tell other people. How many people have you told about home performance, John?
All of them.
We're working on that with this video.
You get converts. You get the people that want to have, I mean, because the benefits of all of this stuff are also environmental. You know, you're not creating pollution that's sort of exacerbating all of these health problems.
Yeah.
John's net zero. He's buying the 12,000 kilowatt hours a year that he uses from wind farm. So you're effectively net zero carbon at your house, which is pretty exciting.
No, it's amazing.
Yeah. For a 1918 home in Cleveland in a cold climate running on electricity, it's not supposed to be possible.
Where you're fracking natural gas, so much natural gas fracking is going on in Ohio that natural gas is almost free, and yet
Your house actually costs less to operate than a nearly identical client with a furnace.
who also spends very little a year on his energy bill, but he's spending a little bit more. And part of that is he's got a gas meter, and there's a fee for that meter that's like $27 a month. So just the billing charge ends up being about a quarter of his annual expense.
Half.
Well, half of his heating.
Well, the only gas appliance in his house is the furnace. So half of his gas bill is just paying for the meter to be on the wall.
Right.
I think he's spending his money well. So
People have furnaces that are working really well and are the right size, and they're loath to get rid of them. And so when you're designing a budget, we design the net zero potential budget, but sometimes replacing the equipment doesn't fit. You know, and so we have an example where his equipment really couldn't be justified,
it was 10 months old.
and it wasn't wrong.
It was only kind of wrong. Not
Right.
really wrong.
Not really wrong.
But following up on that question, though, really the main reason we want to understand what works and what doesn't is our ultimate goal is to decarbonize every U.S. home. So how do we get every home running on electricity and then convert it to be renewable electricity supply so that no fossil fuels are used to heat and cool and light and our homes, plus, you know, wash the clothes and dry the clothes and the dishes and all that stuff. All of that is done with renewable electricity.
And how do you do that in a way that's justifiable, where you're not virtue signaling? You're doing it because the numbers make sense.
Yeah.
because a lot of people can't afford to do stuff where the numbers don't make sense.
So when you started this, how many years ago? How many years ago did you start this?
10 years ago for me, actually about that for you.
So when you started this 10 years ago, did you imagine that this trajectory was going to happen, that you were going to be able to solve these issues?
This crazy punk did. He figured all this out way before me. He taught me.
Well, so when it started to congeal for me is during the BPI classes. First of all, I had all of these preconceived notions that were like weeds, and building science was pulling all these weeds out by the roots, and so my brain was going like this all the time. Well, wait, so houses don't need to breathe, and tighter is better, and all of that stuff. Then I got to the point where I understood that there was energy modeling software that tied to the losses through all of these different components and the replacement through equipment, and that it would actually do cost-benefit analysis and do load calcs. And so suddenly I was like, so you're telling me there's a chance
That I can fix this house.
that I could. So I was suddenly like, oh, this is just an economic model, and it's just math. And being a little bit Aspergen, you already got that part, did you? A little bit Aspergen. This guy's not a little bit Aspergen.
Definitely too big of a furnace. Definitely.
So being a little bit Aspergen, I like numbers. And math, it's nice because if you do it right, it doesn't lie. And so there's beauty in that for me. And you can go and do this stuff that is really cool and understand the costs. If you do it right, you get to net cost. And there are other things that we'd like to see happen. We'd like to see calculations for energy use intensity per square foot.
Better explain that. So that's how much energy a house uses per square foot per year. And it's kind of close to a miles per gallon for a house. There is no totally great number for that, but that's pretty good.
Well, miles per gallon isn't great either, because if you go from 40 to 50 miles per gallon, is that just as good as going from 15 to 25 miles per gallon? Well, if you do the calculation over 1,000 miles, it's not. Sounds like you did a 10 mile per gallon improvement, but the 15 to 25 is saving a whole lot more fuel. And so numbers can be confusing, and they can be used to confuse. And so there is no such thing as a perfect metric for this, but energy use intensity per square foot is really elegant in a lot of ways. And if you use it as a comparable against an average, you can get better houses than average, and you can get worse houses than average. And that matters to people. We think that that will be interesting to people. They want to know if their house is better than average or worse than average. And if you take it a step further, you can change it from energy use intensity per square foot to cost per square foot. And now you can help people understand how much more or less than the average the house costs to run per year. Once you do that, you're not very far away from capitalizing better houses and capital penalizing worst houses, which really you should. A house that costs $3,000 in energy a year, but is identical to your house, which costs $1,200 a year, well, that extra $1,800 a year, that extra $150 a month, some of that should get recognized at resale, shouldn't it? It doesn't. If you capitalize that over 15 years, $180 a month, what's that? $1,800 a year. So even if you don't
$20,000 to $25,000.
even if you don't put an interest rate on it, your house should be, by all rights, on a cash flow basis, worth $25,000 more than that $3,000 house. And by the way, there are a lot of houses like yours that are spending $3,000 a year.
Yep.
A lot of them. So if we don't figure out a way for people to compare it to the average, you will not be able to recapture. Let's not even talk about the $25,000 that is baked into the value of your house. You won't be able to recapture a fraction of that money. So we think that the market and banks and homeowners and realtors will recognize value if they have a simple enough way of seeing that value. But right now, there's no simple way of seeing that value, and since they can't see it easily, they won't place a value on it. And we think that energy use intensity is the way for people to see that value.
Thank you, Mr. Economist.
That's great, because I really want to do a little small video, documentary style, of real estate agents. This is kind of what you're talking about, but real estate agents coming into my house and asking them to appraise my house, and they're going to pull comps. And so that is part of actually the education process, because I know exactly what they're going to do. They're going to say my house is worth $150,000. I'm going to say, what are you comparing it to? To that house down the street?
Yeah.
No.
Right.
This is an energy efficient home. So we'll talk more about that in the future. But
Okay.
that's great that you just said all this stuff.
Did
Eric
that
is
make
working
sense?
on those calculations too right now, and our
I want
calculator
to-
will do some of those things.
In a way, I wanted to like hit the real estate industry like Blockbuster
Ton of
Scenery did
bricks.
back in the 60s and 70s, and how that was taken down and people did audits on it. Another story.
Well,
about
it
that.
frees
But
up capital.
so much.
It
Yeah.
frees up capital that right now is held hostage because it's invisible.
It's crazy
Yeah.
what it could actually do in educating people, but also changing the money game.
The other problem we have is right now, homeowners that we're dealing with have to make the decision that they're going to put $20,000 into their house that is going to have to be depreciated to zero over the course of their occupancy. Because when they go to sell the house, they may get zero for those improvements.
Yeah.
And if we could take those improvements and allow them to $25,000 worth of improvements and depreciate it to $12,000, then they're really only spending $13,000 for that $25,000 worth of improvement, and getting the benefit of $25,000 worth of improvement over the rest of their occupancy
Because they took the house to the next level.
because they took the house to the next level, and because the market can recognize the value of that $25,000 even if it applies a discount to it.
We're going to have to come back. I'm going to have to come back out. We're going to have to talk more about this. I just don't know.
Well,
I
that's-
already want to sit at the table and like have us just like chat for a while.
That's going to be a much harder lift than what we're doing with the work, because that's going to involve a whole lot of people.
That's a market making.
That's a market problem.
Oh yeah, it is. But I just the brainstorming and even more dialogue along this line, but what we're talking about now. So
This is more obvious to homeowners. What we're doing here versus the calculator thing is only going to be obvious after it's done looking back. Although this is sort of an after it's done looking back too.
But I already have wheels turning in terms of how to market this, and I don't even know half the stuff you guys know
Okay.
regarding what you're doing with Eric right now. So,
Yeah.
Going back a little bit, just a couple more questions. Do you want to talk about the lineage of your energy smart?
I'm trying to stay higher level in all this stuff. From the way the rest of this interview is going.
Okay, Ted, you're gonna be on in 3, 2, 1. Nice, with the twice, perfect. So this is, I have all this footage about the house, my house,
Mhm.
and you guys were a huge part of I have all this footage of the house, 4 years worth that we're gonna be putting together in documentary to promote what we did, energy efficiencies, the energy efficiency behind it, how it's a home of the future, and I want you guys just to talk about that a little bit. Like, you've already mentioned a few things about how I'm now net zero, which was a surprise to me, because I was always just like, okay, net zero means I have solar panels and I'll be close to like $0, like I won't be asking for energy from the grid, but I
But
was
then you have to
excited
spend all
coming
this
up here,
capital.
Jim.
Yeah, but you have to
I was
spend
excited
25
coming up
grand
here,
first.
But now I'm even
Yeah.
like, wow, I actually am net zero. It's like a whole nother way of like promoting. It's like I am net zero now, people. Like, do you understand that? Like what we did with the house, and so many things you've said today apply to my house with what you've done to it and how it's gone to the next level, how it's just on its own trajectory.
The problem that we see is that people think that they have to do Herculean things. So they end up seeing these houses that are like House Beautiful and then having these examples of crazy stuff that's being done to these houses. This old house kind of stuff. Wow, that's really cool. I'm not ever gonna do that. That's never gonna happen to me. And so it's sort of discouraging because you're like, well, if you keep showing people Rolls Royces and then telling them about how the umbrella slides into the door, they're gonna be like, well, that's really helpful and applies to my life when it rains.
I have an umbrella.
Yeah. I mean, look, we got to show people what's possible for them. This is possible for normal people, not for somebody that wants to do a total gut rehab. And we have no children, and so our $400,000 that we have in the education account can get spent rehabbing our 2,000 square foot house. That is so not sustainable. It's not repeatable. It's not replicable. It isn't something that average people are ever going to do. And so how is that helpful, except that it discourages the average person instead of encouraging them? What you're doing is being able to show the average person, this is actually possible, and holy shit, was it awesome. Right?
Absolutely.
You're like, this is great. I did it. You can do it. It's not the $4 million house with the incredible views of the mountain and ceiling to floor windows and crazy ground source heat.
Yeah. Yeah, it's got a $250,000 HVAC system. Like, great, I bought my house for $110,000.
Yeah, a lot of good that does me. I am really encouraged to do nothing now.
Yeah.
This, what you're doing, the clients that he's getting to do all of these amazing things for are everyday people, and it's like, this is what everyday people can do. And yes, you can get to net zero carbon by going pure electric. And if you do a really good job of going pure electric, you'll have very small energy bills and an incredibly comfortable and healthy house. And how awesome is that? Now, the next thing you can do is solar panels. Well, you could also maybe get a Tesla Model 3. Instead of the solar panels, you're buying your electricity from wind anyway. So instead, let's do something that's really fun. And that'll further reduce your carbon footprint.
Okay. So you can refer to me in this? Just John, this is the kind of last part, but just yeah, again, more on my house, just like what did you guys do? How did you model it? What was the process?
You want me to
Well-
actually take a turn here?
So he did an energy audit where he measured a whole bunch of stuff, including your leakage and your insulation.
Wait. So with John's house, he did an energy audit starting it.
With John's house, Nate did an energy audit where he measured a whole lot of things, including insulation levels and windows and surfaces and air leakage with a blower door. And then he went and looked for specific problems with his thermal image camera. And then he sent his data to us, me and my partner, an energy efficiency specialist, and we do energy modeling. And so we did an energy model, and then Nate and I talked about improvements, and we adjusted the improvements, and we trued the model up so that it accurately reflected the use of your house. And this is really important because usually when you do a first run at an energy model, it tells you the house uses $5,000 a year worth of energy. And so what you need to do is sort of like a bag reconciliation where you get the, where you say, okay, so house doesn't use that much. So while we measured the insulation, it may be performing better than the energy model recognizes. So we're going to increase the insulation level of the house so it drives the energy use down. And what you're trying to do is get the model and the actual to line up or within a reasonable range. Because then when you do improvements that save energy, the energy is going to be reflective of the
Reality.
$2,200 a year that you were spending instead of the $5,000 that was modeled. So if we cut your energy use in half, it looks like you're going to save $1,100 a year instead of $2,500 a year. This one cut in half is $2,500. Your actual house cut in half is $1,100. So you want to start from a true place so that you get to a true place.
Yeah.
And not an overstated place. So we do that, and then we brainstorm on the packages and the improvements, and we see the effect that they have on the model of your house in an energy perspective, and the effect of the load, so that we can, because sometimes we'll try to reach a little bit to get your load down so you can get smaller equipment, and I think we talked a lot about that before. So it's a whole bunch of different things, and then I hand it to
And then it
Nate.
comes back to me, yeah, and then I come to your house and I talk to you about, so here's all the stuff we found.
Wait, it doesn't come to him and then he comes to your house.
Oh.
It comes to him and he does a shitload of work.
Yeah, there's another half a day anyways worth of work.
It
I'm
comes to
packaging
him.
it so that I can bring it to you and present it to you and walk
Let me
through
rephrase
everything.
this. Were you pleased with what happened in my house?
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah.
What are you guys happy about?
that you're happy.
Oh, that actually really is the biggest thing. Subjectively, do you love your house?
That's all that we really.
Okay, we did
That's
good.
the thing we
We
care
win.
most about.
Yeah. But I can prove with 20 different metrics why you love your house. And there's maybe 20 other people in the country that can come anywhere close to proving why their clients like their house as well as you do. We just wanted it to work.
And learn.
Yeah.
Learn so that, because predictability is the key. If we get to a point where outcomes are highly predictable, future consumers will not perceive this as a very risky endeavor. They'll in fact perceive it as a very safe endeavor. I want to get what I'm told I'm going to get as a consumer.
For what you said you would pay.
And if I go lease a car for $300 a month, I don't want a $400 a month payment showing up. And if I go lease a car for $300 a month, I don't want crank windows when we agreed that they would be power. So I want what you told me I was going to. I don't want paybacks. Our paybacks on our projects, if we don't have an oil project, tend to range from 50 to 235 years on the energy savings alone. 50 to 235 years are the financial energy related paybacks of our projects. And recently we broke a record. We got a project with a 997 year payback. People aren't doing this because they're going to save college tuition money. People save $300 to $500 a year, and they're happy about that because it's icing on the cake.
You sure you don't want to party like it's $29.99?
You guys. Hey,
Right? So one of the big problems in this industry is everybody talks about how energy efficiency is such a good deal. It's a horrible deal. This is the biggest lie, and it turns all these programs into frauds. It's a complete fraud. They're telling you what a great investment it is, and then afterwards they don't track.
Yeah.
Because they know it's not a great investment, and if they track, they expose the fact that the emperor has no suit.
Well, how many audits did I see? Well, actually, you got one of the gas company audits, and I saw them routinely where, like, if you insulate your attic, you will save $2,500 a year. And then I look at their total bill, and they're only spending $1,700 a year. So if you insulate your attic, you're going to get an $800 check every year from the gas company. Thank you for being our customer.
Yeah, dying to see how that works.
So, but that's typically the kind of math you get. Actually, well, we just saw numbers from California. Their realization rate is 10 to 20%, which means if they promise you $100 in savings, 10 to 20 bucks shows up. That's typical in our world because they require these projects to be cost effective. So that basically it will pay for itself in energy savings over the projected life of the stuff you.
So they have to exaggerate in their models in order to justify their, I'm not going to say it, but to justify their cushy positions in government where all they're doing is sucking off the consumer teat. I mean, they're really, and it's abusive. And that level of exaggeration, I don't understand how it's not fraud. I don't know how it's not something that these people should be going to jail for allowing this to continue. They know it. It's not like they don't know it. These programs have been going on for years and years and years and years and years, and they do these studies that look 5 years back. So they're like, okay, it's 2017. We're going to do our study on 2012. That's far enough away that we can obfuscate and blame it on the past people, and hopefully we'll be gone by the time that it gets to 2017 and 2022.
It just doesn't have
we
integrity.
got a lot. We're going to cut there.